afternoon, everybody. Hi. It looks like we have a really small class, so let's make this as interactive as possible. You can, if you want, take yourselves off mute. If you have a question, just ask it. Let's make this as useful as possible for you. Okay. What do we want to do today? We want to basically give everybody, give you a greater understanding of the importance of strategic planning, and a little bit more about the process and phases, maybe the more common phases of strategic planning, and really start to think as I talk, as you know your organization, what can you take from this that would be applicable to your organization? Because every single organization is at a different place, what they need to focus on and how they need to plan it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it. So today it's really an overview of things to think about. And so ask away. All right, so let's start really with a definition of strategic planning is, and I'm going to read it out loud because I think it's really important. It's a deliberate, inclusive. It means you're involving as many people as you can, a bold, a brave, strategic thinking, where you want the organization to go. It develops a shared vision. It asks those big questions. It makes you make tough decisions, and it propels change. It's like, where do we want to see our organization in 5 years, in 3 years, in 1 year? And it's like a map. That plan is going to help you get there. But it's really, I would invite you in this process to set the stage to dream big and then come up with very quantifiable ways to get there. But the first step is to dream big. And I'll also say this, that I'm not a consultant. I am so in the weeds of nonprofits, and everybody's going to have a different definition, a different presentation of strategic planning. So this is Elaine's perspective on strategic planning. So strategic planning, it's a tool that describes your organization's priorities and then how to move to get there in a step-by-step direction for 1 year, for 3 years, and for 5 years. And I'd say that because organizations are changing so fast right now, I can't believe it. I think 3 years and even 5 years is probably not very helpful anymore. I'm not sure. For maybe like an organization that's well established, that's not going through a lot of change, maybe 3 years is going to work. But for many smaller nonprofits, maybe you want to look at the time frame. And it's a process for defining and determining the organization's roles, its priorities, and its specific actions in service to the mission. So that's kind of an overall what it's all about. It's dream big, and then step by step how to get there. It answers the questions, really, I think 3 questions. Your higher purpose, what you're trying to do, why you exist, and what's different, or what do you want to be different because you exist, your organization is there. What's the big purpose? And then the strategic plan is going to say, step by step, how we get there. And it's also going to say how you track it and manage it, how you measure success. Who's responsible for what, how to monitor, where's the money. So it's such a beautiful map for where the organization wants to go. I think this is really important, to involve as many people as you can. It's going to be most successful when you bring in all of your staff, I don't know if all, but you get representative, but it's as collaborative and comprehensive as possible. And depending on what you choose to do for your strategic plan, you could involve line staff, leadership, board members, volunteers, partners, funders. It depends about the scope and the money and the time that the organization wants to use for this process. But it's most successful when you involve as many voices and diverse voices as you can. Because it's the map going forward, and you want to make sure that you're hearing everybody. And at least they're a part of the discussion. And also, I believe that every organization is interested in building its internal capacity. And by bringing all those diverse voices into the conversation about where this organization should be and how to get there, really builds, I don't know, buy-in, enjoyment. It builds, I just want to be a part of, to want to be a part of that organization. And every nonprofit struggles with capacity. It's very hard to get enough capacity to run the way that you want to run. So this is an opportunity to help build that by including people's voices in the direction. And also, please stop me at any time if you have any questions, okay? Because make it useful for you. And sometimes with this strategic planning process, you can't, right? But it's the aim. You want to try so hard to do that. And you're going to have a much better result at the end. Might be messier, right? Because you're wrestling with pretty difficult questions, where you want the organization to go, or how you're going to get there, or how's the best way forward. But it works best if you can ensure everyone is engaged. So what are the benefits? And these are pretty straightforward. If you have a shared vision that everyone understands, it just makes for a more solid, more cohesive working environment. Everybody's on the same page. And that's pretty hard to get sometimes. You have increased efficiency. You have a guideline for your resources, how to get them. You have clear benchmarks for measuring your progress in your organization. And I believe you also have greater engagement from your board, from your staff, from your partners, from your key stakeholders, when you have a clear understanding of where the organization is going. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things too, right? And I guess it's interesting on this call, we don't have very many people, but they're all different levels of an organization. And to feel empowered that at this level, your voice is really important, because you have a perspective that no one else may have in that organization. And to want to share that and get it heard is really important. So this is it can be a really big document, and we're going to talk about scaling it down. But some of the common components of a strategic plan is, okay, what kind of resources are we talking about? And then for our goals, if we're talking about where do we want the organization to go, they're kind of visionary, right? It's like, are we going to do exactly what we've been doing? Or do we want to shake it up a bit? Do we want to try a new direction over here? What are our goals? And it takes a while to envision what those should be. Maybe they don't change, maybe they do. So you have to make sure and start looking at your goals, which are not so measurable. It's where you want to go, right? The budget to get there. The objectives are what's measurable. Who, what, how, when, and where are we going to reach those goals? And then the activities for those. Now, these might be in a separate spreadsheet as your strategic plan, but this is the way that it's most helpful. Now, let me put in another person, I guess, sorry. How we measure the outcomes. So it's not enough to say, for example, we had 100, I don't know, 10,000 people visit the library, or Jewish Family Service helped X number of people. An outcome is, as a result of that, what is different? And that's a much stronger measure and much harder, because it's not just counting people, which is important, but it's not okay as what's different for those people who participated in our services. Much harder to come up with those outcomes, but that's how you know if you're really making a difference in whom you're serving. And then you have a time frame, you have persons responsible, and then you also check and monitor progress. Okay, moving along. Maybe, okay. So getting started. How do you get started? Well, you start by having a conversation with the staff, whoever you're going to include. And again, I say try to make it as broad as you can, not always possible, but that would be a way to get started. If you have the option of hiring an outside facilitator, it's great, right? Because they don't have a vested interest in anything. They're just wanting to hear all the voices and consolidate them and reach a way forward. A lot of organizations can't afford to have an outside facilitator, but if you can, it's great. If you can't, then the person has to be really objective, whoever is facilitating that discussion. It's really important, number 3, to look at the data out there that will help you to understand the impact or the challenges that your organization is having. And there's all kinds of data. And then as a part of planning or getting started, number 4 is really determining the timeline, the location, the number of meetings, all that kind of stuff you want to agree on beforehand. And then you want to discuss the process. And if it's going to be a short process and bang, bang, you're done because you got to get it done and whatever, or maybe a very lengthy process, and both have advantages and disadvantages. But you'll want to really think about how much your organization can commit to and doing it well. And then finally, I would say your strategic plan needs to align with other internal and external plans. For example, I used to work as the executive director of the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, wildfire, in a very high wildfire area of California. Well, there were a whole lot of plans out there. The fire department had a plan. Different local fire departments had a plan. So I, as a small nonprofit, wanted to align what we were doing with those larger plans that were in existence and make sure that we're not doing something that's going to not support our key partners. So to kind of look at in the bigger picture, what information is out there that you might want to align with. For example, if you worked for a clinic, it might be that clinic is associated with a hospital, and kind of just be aware of if there's a hospital plan, a clinic plan, a strategic, that they're aligned in some way. And lastly, I would say the last line on this slide is really defining the process that's going to work for you. And I don't think I can stress that enough, that I think a lot of organizations do the strategic planning and it goes nowhere. You've dedicated time and then not very much changes, right? So really give a thoughtful process to how to make it work for your organization. Internal assessments and external understanding. So it's understanding your internal capacity to do the work and also your understanding of the environment, the communities that you're impacting. So it's both, right? Because if you don't have the internal capacity to do the work, the staff, a car, those kind of things. You can't do what you want to do. So the planning has to take into consideration both the internal operation, the internal organization, the internal capacity, as well as where you want to go out in the community, the impact that you want to make. And I like this quote. I've heard it before, and it says, "It's been said that a leader," and also in place of leader, I'm going to put organization. "It's been said that an organization is only as good as the data or information that is provided to make good decisions about the future course of the organization." So having an understanding of your place in the environment, right, is really important. And there's all kind of data for that. There's all kinds of data to help you. Some of it's anecdotal and some of it's more formal. Like another example of an outcome would be when I worked at the Fire Safe Council, we had to help these communities develop plans to be safe in the next wildfire, these neighborhoods that were very at risk for wildfire. Well, to say we want money or we want to develop a plan is like, oh yeah, yawn, very boring. But if you talk about this community is going to be safer in the next wildfire because of, now we're talking about, it's a different conversation, right? The means to it is the plan, but the outcome is a safer, fire-resistant Ventura County. So outcomes are harder, they take more thought, but they are far more, you need both. You need like the number, the slides, the equipment, the training, but the outcome is what's different because of those things. And you want to frame all your work, I think, in terms of outcomes. So these are kind of the common parts of a strategic plan. It's, your finances, we got to raise more money, the board governance, we need more, we need to train the board, we need a better board policy, we need more board members. What are we going to do about the board? That could be a whole part of a strategic plan. Raising money, philanthropy, your program work, whether or not there's diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, maybe work around HR and the work culture. These are some common components of a strategic plan, but this could be overwhelming for an organization, right? So you just take the pieces that are going to be most, that are where your organization needs to focus. Otherwise, I think it gets too overwhelming and it's not practical. So one way to begin the process is to do some assessments of your organization. Can be very simple assessments. Like Vicki could ask volunteers, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what would help you maintain engagement. I don't know, something like that. But it's, let's say that we look for Vicki's example there's too much of a turnover of volunteers. Well, the assessment might be, well, we need to really understand what's going well and where we need to improve in order to keep our volunteers, and not only keep them, but to grow them. We need to establish an understanding of the organizational health. So it's really just understanding the background a little bit, right? What is part of what's causing part of the problem, and then you can really, when you come up with solutions in your strategic plan, it's based on fact. It's based on the data that you've collected. It's based on more objective decision making. Instead of it going all over the map, you have some data as a blueprint from which to start. And I just think that's it's more helpful if you're able to spend a little bit of time understanding a little bit of the history. We're going to keep going. And the way to do this, it's not hard. It's not rocket science at all. You can have one-on-one conversations. Maybe that there's, I don't know, 40 volunteers. Well, you talk to maybe 8 of them, 5 of them, a percentage of them, right? You have open-ended conversations. You could have a questionnaire that goes out in SurveyMonkey. You can have a facilitated group discussion. You could look at existing data. All of that is to really help you understand so that when you come up with your strategic plan, the way forward, it's based on this assessment, right? It's based specifically on what you found your organization, your volunteers need, or your staff, or whatever it is. We all together? Okay. So, and I'm going to invite you to speak a little bit if you want to. In your organizations, I just would love to hear from you what you feel would be the most important area to tackle first in a strategic plan. What do you think?
I'm noticing a lot of these points are strong points for the org that I'm working with. The only thing that I think we have struggled in is keeping track of donations and thanking our donors. We have been establishing a kind of system. I'm kind of in charge of it, but I've never worked in this before. And working with a nonprofit, it's only been about a year, a little bit over a year now for me. That's why I'm here, because I want to learn more and I want to get skills that will be helpful for me to bring to the org. But yeah, just as far as like the org being very focused and collaborative in our mission is very solid, and I'm glad to hear it.
So that's wonderful. And then I would say that if one of the areas of vulnerability is just a really robust donor program and how to really how to track and measure donations and whether or not thanking donors, trying to get them at the next level of giving, to really think through in your strategic plan, let's come up with a really great, exciting way to thank our donors because we couldn't be here without them, and what that looks like. And maybe that's enough. And that would be great to have that.
I agree.
Yeah. And also just, it's wonderful to hear that your organization is doing these things. That's wonderful. Anybody else? Okay. If you change your mind. Oh, yes. Nope. Yes.
I can.
Okay.
So we have so many different departments that I actually don't know where we stand with a lot of things, but everybody seems to be on top of things. So just within our volunteer engagement department, that's where I know the most about everything. So one of the things that we recently figured that we needed is an ongoing engagement and recognition plan. So that's something that I'm helping to create now. And because right now our director's only been around for about 6 months. So our team is still very new and we're really in that kind of reactive phase. Like, oh, it's Volunteer Appreciation Month coming in 2 months. So we need to plan something for that. We don't really have like a year-long or a multi-year plan. So that's what we're trying to work out now, is how people might want to be appreciated, and little things that we can do as get-togethers or like swag type things or those types of things. So that's kind of where we are now, just still identifying gaps and trying to fill those.
That's great. And I would say that how helpful it is to talk with other like-minded nonprofits and ask how they're handling these things, because right, everybody is struggling with the same stuff. And so it's really, if you have maybe 3 organizations that are go-to, and ask your the colleague that does your job at this other organization how they're handling it, it's a really helpful to get that information, and almost everybody is willing to share. So It's, if you can, and you have the capacity and the bandwidth, and you're not, often if you hire an external facilitator for this, they'll help do all these things. But if you can't do it, you can't do it, right? But it's really helpful to have an environmental approach. So what makes your organization unique and strong from those that are providing very similar services? And that's an important exercise. What do you do better? Your niche, and really understand that well, because that understanding that's going to go to your volunteers, your donors, your key partners, is really understanding what you do uniquely and well. Do you have adequate data to really understand the situation? What trends or changes in the environment are likely to impact your organization as it moves forward? Like, for example, when I was at the Fire Safe Council, until this season, there were there's terrible wildfires in California, right? There's lots and lots and lots of money coming down from the state and federal government that I knew about. I knew what was coming. But I also knew that our organization was very small and it had no capacity to manage state and federal dollars or compete for them successfully. So in understanding the environment, I knew that if we wanted to compete successfully for all those state and federal dollars that are coming from for wildfire, which are huge, I needed to grow the capacity. And I understood that, and I could use that argument to build the capacity, the internal capacity and strength of the organization, so we could compete for those state and federal dollars that were going to go to somebody else. They're going to go somewhere. So it's understanding the environment with which you work. Really important. And also it's always important, I think, to do a SWOT analysis, which is really looking at your organization's strengths, your organization's challenges, the opportunities, and the threats. There we go. I think we talked about that before, common components of a strategic plan. I'm not going to go over it again. So when you are working on your strategic plan, these are the things that are going to go into it. What are the resources available? What is the goal? So for Lauren, it might be would be volunteer engagement, so improved volunteer engagement, but I would come up, but that might be the overall goal. What is going to be the budget over the next year for that? How are you going to get there? What are your objectives to do that? And they should be smart. They should be measurable. So the goal, improved donor engagement or in volunteer engagement, that's not measurable, right? It's just, but when you get down to the objective, it's okay. What does that mean? Does that mean we want to have, I don't know, that volunteers work more hours? Does it mean that we want to have an increased number of volunteers? Does it mean we want to have younger volunteers? Does it we want to have more diversity of volunteers? What do we even mean by that? And how do we measure it? Because you can't get where you want to go unless you define those things. And then you come up with, okay, I know my goal. Now I know my objectives. And I would say maybe 3 or 4 max. Then, okay, what are the activities to get us there? So what are you going to do differently for volunteering, for more younger people to get to volunteer? What does that look like? And then the indicators would be, okay, we're going to do a training because we need to go out to an after-school program and give a training and invite younger people to become involved with my organization. I don't know. But it would be, okay, the indicators are a completed curriculum, a number of workshops offered, number of trainers trained, whatever that is, that would be an indicator. And some of this some organizations do this completely like this, and some don't use all these categories, right? You're going to do what's going to work for you. Then you're going to want to have your outcome, which is, as a result of getting more volunteers, what's different? If you had really stable volunteer force, what would be different for your organization?
I think to an extent we have that, but growing that even more would mean that we could get more meals out per day to more isolated and homebound older adults, which would increase their nutrition. And we also provide transportation for older adults, which would relieve stress on the caregivers and help them feel more connected to the community.
That was beautiful. That was great.
We just need lots of people to do it.
So that would be an outcome. You would give the time frame. You would also say, okay, who is responsible for this? And then you're going to track your progress. And this would be, and I think you all have access to the PowerPoint. If you don't, it's on the Nonprofit Solutions. This is a nice little form that you can use to develop it, right? And you can take some away. You have to use all the categories, but it's a way to get started. So let's say that you do this whole thing, and it's a real, the organization really makes it has to be a dedicated effort, because it's going to take staff and volunteer time to do it. And so you want to think about these things. Who's responsible for managing the plan? Where does it lie? You're going to want to ask, how are you going to communicate your plan to your organization's stakeholders so everybody is aligned together? And you're going to want to also think about, how are we going to update, revise the plan, things like that. So kind of really thinking it through from the very beginning to not just the end, but how it's going to really work in your organization and not sit on a shelf and never be looked at, which I think happens a good portion of the time. So, it says here, why strategic plans fail. And I would imagine most of us have been in that situation where, you go through it and nothing happens. It just sits on, and you forget about it, gathers dust, right? These are some reasons why it fails. You don't have the right people involved in helping plan it. You don't have a really good understanding of the environment with which you're working. Writing the plan, and then it sits on a shelf, right? And I think that's pretty common. Ignoring marketplace reality, or not knowing about it. Having no accountability or follow through, no one responsible. Having unrealistic goals and a lack of focus and resources to do it. And having wrong people in the positions. So, and I think these are all pretty common for why strategic planning, maybe people go through it and then that's the end of it. And it's pretty frustrating. So then I just included for you a summary of a 2-page document that we summarized from a larger document that everybody could have easy access to in their office or on a bulletin board or on a dashboard or something like that, so that it's in everybody's face where we're going. Plus, it's an amazing document to send to donors, to funders, to stakeholders about a summarized version of your strategic plan. And in this one, it's 2 pages, and it talks about the mission, the vision, framework for the work, how important one sentence is on collaboration and partnership, what are the strategic priorities for the organization, and there were 4, and then how they were going to get there through these 4 emerging programs. And that was it. That was that was like the outside version to our partners, our donors, and our funders about our strategic plan. And it's really, this document is really helpful. A summarized version is really helpful to have. Any questions so far? I'm just rambling. We all okay? Okay. You could also create a dashboard of your strategic plan, same idea. It's like in a car, right? You have an easy to understand information, nicely displayed right in your face all the time. So you don't forget where you're going, what's important. And the dashboard, like the strategic plan, is you mutually agree on what to include in it. You make the work, and I think this is really important, and we don't think about it enough. For the strategic plan, for a dashboard, we make the work incremental. We make the work doable. We make it step by step, because it's easy to get overwhelmed when all of us have so many balls in the air in doing our work. So we really make it incremental, slowly, one piece at a time. And it's important because the reason we all work for nonprofits is we want to see a change. We want to make a difference. We want quality of life improved. And so we want to take on all that we can take on often, but it's really critical to break it down into small, measurable, incremental pieces. And then you can have it's nice to make it visually attractive to look at. And I think if you can have that summary or a dashboard, it really does, it just strengthens the overall feeling for the organization through shared decision-making. Everybody's on the same page with indicators and benchmarkers, and everyone can see how we're moving forward. So basically, you've got a strategic plan, and then you summarize it, and you can have a dashboard that's always available to everybody. That's the only point here, is make it a living document. And this was just one way to do a dashboard. Is, let's say, an objective for our strategic plan was promote word of mouth, marketing, services, create tools, business cards for board members. Staff's responsible, Q1, it wasn't done, and it was checked off. I can't see it on my screen. Q4, done, right? And this one was done, completed Q1, survey clients about what they heard, where they heard about the organization, done. So everybody kind of sees the progress, and you can feel good about checking that box off that everybody sees on a dashboard. Okay, moving right along. Let me see what time it is. How are we doing? Okay. Let's say you do this and you're going to really focus on maybe volunteer engagement. Then you're going to decide you want to keep people informed about how you're doing. So I would say keep it short, keep it simple, but let people know your major accomplishments during the month or quarter, key progress that you're making, identify any challenges, maybe some notes. Keep it short and simple, but it's really important to keep people aware of how you're doing. And it will also elevate you and your staff who are working on it to other leaders within the organization. Keep it short, keep it simple, but keep everybody informed. And now I'm going to get off on a little bit of a tangent. So let me see if so any questions so far about kind of, that's like a very quick quick overview of strategic planning from Elaine's point of view. Any questions on that? Okay. Everybody needs money, and I use every opportunity in the world to connect with donors and key volunteers, key partners. It's just the way to be successful. So I believe that if you can talk to your funders and your donors about your strategic planning goals in a way that's compelling, they're going to buy into you and believe in your organization if you share with them how you're thinking. So I really recommend, if you go through the strategic planning process, then putting it together in a 2-page document and sending it to your donors. So because we all rely on grants and donors and special events and things like that to survive, to do what we want to do. So I believe this can be a great tool for helping to raise money. So tips on working with funders to support strategic planning efforts. Funders want to support successful organizations. Successful organizations do strategic planning. So you tell them in a short, succinct way the impact that you're making in the community, why supporting your strategic plan is crucial to grow the organization, and how their funding will make a difference. So you can link your little letter. It can just be a letter, right? It doesn't have to be anything big, just to let them know what you're doing to your mission, so that you're growing the work of your mission. And some of this work in our strategic plan is indirect, like the infrastructure costs, and some of it is direct. But more and more funders are trying to support capacity needs, infrastructure needs than they have before. And so you're helping educate funders about why a strategic planning process is so important. So these are some things to think about. And bring along those donors, those funders in your journey to becoming a more impactful organization. I believe create a 1-page compelling statement about what you want to do with your strategic planning process, and send it out to tell your funders that it's going to increase your impact. Share the document with your board, your funders, your donors. And then this is kind of common sense. If you already have a donor, if you already have a foundation that supports you, or a grantor, let them know, even if you're not asking them for money or anything, just let them know that you're doing this, because it really strengthens their regard for you. So there you go. So and I'm winding down here. These are Elaine's golden rules. Celebrate your accomplishments. I don't think we do that enough. From the very beginning, include a diversity of voices in the process. Be flexible, because things are going to change all the time. Review the factors out of your control, like the pandemic. There could be an economic or environmental situations that we could never foresee. So, and then really create a step-by-step doable process for success. And I think if we do all these things, what this strategic planning process is going to do for your organization is it's going to build the capacity of the staff and volunteers. And that's really what you want, is you want everybody to be more engaged, more knowledgeable, more clear about how you're going to make an impact out there in the communities that you're serving. Let's see if and this again was the definition of strategic planning by a colleague of mine that I love. And I said it earlier, that it's really to think big and bold. And it may be that you don't have the money to do it right now, but that's the way to get there, is by first dreaming, right? And then if you can dream it, you can make it happen. and then design a planning process that's specific to your organization and your organization's priority needs.